Player Profiler Posse, welcome back to another installment of the First Mover podcast. I will be joined shortly here by a very special guest, a fellow member of the 1 week season contributor crew. But looking at this slate in week 8, we finally have a mega full slate. We have no buys. We have 13 games on the main slate, but we have a slew of low game totals. So it's going to have a lot of feel similar to some of these slates that we've had in the past. But you know the deal. We're here. We're getting a first look at player pricing release on DraftKings. So let's jump into it. So as I teased here before we got into it, I'm joined by Xandamere. Xandamere is having some issues with his webcam. He just got a brand new computer because he is in the midst of a major life change, stopping his work and now dedicating more time to fantasy football. So that's exciting. But with that, Xandamere, how are we doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Yeah, unemployed now. So, clearly I'm begging for quarters to put together the money for a webcam. But hopefully I'll collect enough soon, and you'll be able to see my wonderful face as we talk through shows like this.
Yeah, dude. And I wanted to have you on. It's been difficult with my personal schedule on Mondays when I record these, but I wanted to have you on. I'll have to have you on again once you get a webcam so we can see your bright, beautiful, shining face.
Yeah, I would love that. I'm super excited to be able to have more time to, invest in fantasy and DFS, in, player props and content. This has really become my passion in the last few years, and it's exciting to be able to, dive into that full time and see if that can make that work.
Well, tell me a little bit about what you have going on over at 1 week season before we jump into the meat and potatoes here.
Yeah. Okay. So at 1 week season, I am kind of the showdown specialist. For all the major island games, Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night, early morning Sunday for when there's London games, etc. I write the NFL article, the NFL Edge article for that game from a showdown point of view, because showdown it's not a new format anymore, right? It's been around for several years, but that really, when it first kicked off, that really became my niche in the DFS space. And, new formats tend to have a lot of edge because it takes people a while to figure it out. So that's what I was really focusing on. And I started playing heavily in Showdown and creating content for Showdown. And, I do write content for other things, for main slate stuff too, but I'd say Showdown is really my niche. That's my thing.
What about we got some new stuff going on with this Props Insider? I just threw it on the screen. Throw me a real quick elevator pitch on what's going on with that.
Oh, Props Insider. So if you haven't heard of prop betting, the TLDR prop betting is, instead of betting on the 49ers to win the game, you're betting on specific player outcomes. So like Christian McCaffrey to have over or under 77.5 rushing yards would be an example of a prop bet. And prop betting is wildly profitable, wildly plus EV, because they're much smaller markets than than betting sides and totals and spreads. And so there are so many more bets available, and books are taking in less money on them compared to the huge amounts they take in on money line bets and spread bets. Yeah. So books are not able to defend those lines as effectively. You can find inefficiencies. So our Props Insider package, we've expanded it this season to cover multiple sports. We had a great MLB season. We do tennis, we do golf, we do football, and we do basketball. And so NBA season starting tomorrow, which is super exciting because there's, NBA season is the best prop sport. And from my perspective, it's the most profitable one because there are so many games, there's so much volume. And so, we've got this service, you can see the profit. It's 106 units. We're using a $100 unit for the purposes of tracking. So we're up 106 units in 2023 already on those other sports. And NBA season hasn't even started yet, which is historically our most profitable sport. So super excited for this. It's going to be a huge NBA season. We've got a really sharp team that we've continued to invest in and expand to encompass more sports and just get really sharp people on board. So I'm super excited about this NBA season. We made about 90 units last season, roughly, in NBA. And so I have, you can never know the future, right? But I have every expectation that we're going to match or beat that this year, which is, just super exciting. In the fantasy sports space, there is no more plus EV thing to do than prop betting. Like, I love DFS. I love best ball. I think that those are things you can have an edge in if you're good. But prop betting is the most consistently profitable and predictable area of how you can make money as a sports fan. So if you're interested in it, check it out on the site. Promo code PROPS gets you $50 off the first month. And if you have any questions about it, hit us up on Twitter or hop in the 1 Week Season Discord and chat with us. We're happy to talk through it, see if it's right for you.
Go check it out. Handing out the promo codes as well. Love it, dude. Go check out props. And we saw when I had that on the screen that there's only 150 spots remaining. Why do we limit the number of people that can get into that service?
Yeah, so one of the interesting things about launching Props Insider last year was our first year, is that we got to kind of look around and see what other people were doing and see where they'd succeeded and where they'd struggled. Props is a soft market. It's not that hard to be profitable betting props. At some point, what becomes harder than finding profitable bets is getting money down, because, when a whole bunch of people all show up and start betting the same thing, right? If we had 1,000 subscribers and they all rush to DraftKings, they're all trying to bet Christian McCaffrey over 77.5 rushing yards at the same time, that line is going to move really quick. And so really big prop services with lots of subscribers, the challenge they have is it's hard to get the lines. They can post a line and in 5 or 10 seconds, that line moves because the books are moving them algorithmically, right? It's not a human watching and being like, oh, look, a bunch of money's coming in, I better shift it. The computer's seeing it moving the line. So we decided to limit the number of subscribers because we feel that's the best way to make sure that we can really deliver a great value to our customers, is trying to keep the subscriber count at a reasonable limit so that the lines we bet don't shift within seconds. Lines are going to move. And I honestly would not trust a prop service that didn't move lines to some extent, because that means that they probably aren't very good at what they're doing. But we want there to be a reasonable amount of time so the average person can fire up their sportsbook and get the bet we select before the line jumps. And so that's why we decided to cap it. We think that's the best way to deliver a great service where our customers are highly likely to be able to actually replicate the results that we're getting, that we're officially tracking.
Super sharp, man. Thanks for keying us in on that. We're going to take a real quick break to hear from the Podfather about the new and improved DFS Dominator app.
DFS getting harder every year, but we're here to make it easier with the DFS Dominator, because I know a lot of optimizers keep coming out. Oh, our optimizer. What about this optimizer? But that optimizer. Well, we have a cash game optimizer that leverages the projections from Dario, Billy, the award-winning projections at playerprofiler.com, and builds the best lineups for cash games that have both upside and stability, because that's what you want. It's a couple clicks, boom, boom, boom. You get the best possible lineup for your cash games. But for tournaments, traditional optimizers don't work. That's why we have a Lineup Genius, which takes you through the process of building lineups the way they should be built. Which quarterbacks you want to be overweight on, then building stacks, then setting runbacks, then optimizing, and generating up to 150 lineups that you can easily import into DraftKings, into FanDuel. That's the DFS Dominator. It's only $45 a year. Not a week. A year. Just go to Player Profiler, click on the DFS Dominator from the menu, and you won't be sorry.
And we're back. Thank you for that quick shout there, Podfather. We are back. I'm here with Xandamere, primary contributor over at 1 Week Season. X, let's talk about this slate coming up, man. I alluded to it in the intro, where we don't have bye weeks this week in week 8. We have 13 games on the main slate, coming off of 2 back-to-back weeks where we had 10 and 11. But the overall feel of this slate is we don't have a lot of high game totals. We have the New York Jets, New York Giants, 36.5. We got the Vikings and the Packers, 42.5. Jaguars and the Steelers, 42. The Saints and the Colts at 43.5. The Falcons in Tennessee, 37.0. the Houston Texans, the Carolina Panthers at 43. Eagles, Commanders, 43.5. Good Lord, stop me when we got some interest here. We got the New England Patriots, the Miami Dolphins. A subdued for the Dolphins, 47.0 game total. The Rams and Cowboys, 45.5. The Browns and the Seahawks, 40.0. Still going here. The Chiefs and the Broncos, 46. That seems low. And finally, to round us out, the Bengals and the 49ers, 45.5. And the Ravens and the Cardinals at 44.5. X, what's your immediate reaction to this kind of overall macro view of the slate?
There's no high game total, right? It's so common that normally we see at least one game that's close to or over 50, and they're all, but like the quote unquote good games. There's no game that stands out from a game total perspective, right? There are games that could clearly be good game environments to target, but there's no one game that's like, aha, this is where people are going to go. This is clearly the best game environment of the week, which is super interesting. And I think that, we're also seeing game totals start to react to the lower scoring environment we've seen in the NFL. Yeah. I saw some stat in the last couple of days that if you, I don't remember the number, but if you just blindly betted every single NFL under this year, you would be way, way up. So we're starting to see Vegas react to that. And so these, the scoring in the NFL is down. And so finally the game totals are coming down, and we have to shift our perspective a little bit, right? A few years ago, we would just automatically hone in and be like, where are the 50 total games? And that'd be like the first pass through looking at Vegas totals is, where are the 50s? Well, the 50s are going to be a lot rarer these days. And that doesn't mean it's a bad slate necessarily. It just means that the NFL is evolving, as it always does. So we have to start shifting our perspective and saying, where are the 45s? And then of the 45s, which ones stand the best chance of really blowing up into something bigger than that?
So we just saw the Denver Broncos pretty much eliminate and remove the Green Bay Packers from the face of the earth for an entire half of play. They shut the Packers out for the first full half. Is this a case of the Broncos are figuring some things out on defense, or is this a case of the Packers are absolute shite?
I think it's a mix. I think it's more the latter, but it's a mix of both, right? Like, for one, the Broncos always play better at home, as most teams do, but the Broncos have a more robust home field advantage than most because of the altitude, right? Like, flying into a high altitude spot and then engaging in it really intense physical exertion for a few hours is hard, right? Like, so it's not uncommon to see offenses struggle in Denver because they just get winded. Green Bay has been an inconsistent offense because they are primarily made up of, a young quarterback and young wide receivers who are talented. We've seen the upside from guys like Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson and Jalen Reed and Jordan Love. We've seen their upside this season, but we've also seen them struggle in other areas. So that doesn't surprise me. I think the Broncos are not I don't believe that they are a historically bad defense. They're a bad defense, but I don't think they're one of the worst defenses we've seen in the last 10 years of NFL play. And that's kind of what they looked like early on in the season, right? Obviously capped by the dismantling by the Dolphins where they gave up 10 touchdowns. So they're not good, but I don't think they're, give up 5 touchdowns every game bad.
And that's important, right? Because we have the Chiefs coming into Mile High to take on the Denver Broncos this week. So do you think that this is another potential letdown spot for a team like the Chiefs? Or do you think after what we saw them do to the Chargers this past week, do you think this is an absolute eruption spot for Patrick Mahomes and company?
The Chiefs are such a hard offense to figure out because they have one weapon, right? They have Travis Kelce. And then they have this merry-go-round of wide receivers who they attempt to use in creative and interesting ways, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. But they don't have like another really, really good pass catcher since Tyreek Hill left. They've got Rice, who is a promising rookie and could evolve to have a great career. They've got Tony, who, flashes upside, but drops balls all over the place and is hurt all the time. They've got, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, who is not exactly known as an elite pass catcher. they've got Hardman, who last year they had a lot of success with scheming work specifically in the red zone. They just got him back. They have Sky Moore, who so far has been a disappointment in his young career. But it's like they have these guys who they use in this carousel, and it's, most of them are either young guys who we don't, they have a lot of upside, but we don't really know their true talent level, or they don't achieve it consistently, or they have kind of older veterans like MVS who, he's a deep threat guy who can occasionally catch a deep touchdown. He did last week, but is wildly inconsistent. And so that makes the Chiefs hard for me to evaluate. They generally find a way to score points, but their offense has not been the world-beating offense that we're used to seeing from Kansas City this year. They've scored over 30 points twice in 7 games so far. They've been held to under 20 points twice, once by these Broncos at home in week 6. And, the other 3 games, they were in the 20s. So are they still a good offense? I mean, yeah, right? Like, it's still got Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is an amazing elite quarterback. Would I say they're the favorite to lead the NFL in points scored again, as they have in past seasons? Probably not. Not with the Dolphins just seeming to go nuclear every week.
Yeah.
I think that they are more likely than not to find some success here, because I don't think that Denver is really, I think if they're below average offense and the Chiefs are an above average, Denver's a below average defense, and I think the Chiefs are an above average offense. But I don't know that this is the game that I want to focus all of my energy and effort on. I'm not sure that that's what that's how I view it.
Yeah, and even last week where they're putting up 40 plus points on the scoreboard, or how many did they score? 30? I don't even remember now.
31?
31. And when they're putting up 30 points on the scoreboard, we look at their snap rates. I mean, Travis Kelce, even in his eruption that he had, and Patrick Mahomes absolutely dismantled the Chargers defense. He threw for 340 yards in the first half. Insane. But Travis Kelce still played only 75% of the offensive snaps. Marquez Valdes-Scantling was the highest pass catcher, the highest wide receiver at 69% snap rate. Sky Moore, 60%. Rashee Rice, 59%. And then they brought these kind of rotational pieces in. Kadarius Toney, 19%. Justin Ross, even 25%. Mecole Hardman in his first game back with the team, 16%. So where is the projectable median projection here on this team outside of Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce? Does not exist. So if we're attacking this spot, and we're probably going to see increased Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce ownership after the week they put up last week, it becomes very difficult to build something around this team because they're not going to project well. I mean, Isaiah Pacheco priced at 6,100. He even saw only 53% of the offensive snaps. We had Jerick McKinnon, who wasn't up here. Jerick McKinnon actually scored a 40-something yard touchdown that was called back for holding. But he is a guy that is extremely boom or bust. You see his 2-touchdown game here in week 3 against Chicago. Really the only fantasy production that he has had this season. So yeah, all those things combined with the recency bias stuff associated with the Chiefs, the fact that they're playing who has been on historically bad paces, Denver Broncos defense, we're probably going to see a lot of Patrick Mahomes. We're going to see a lot of paired with Travis Kelce. But outside that, it becomes very, very difficult to attack this spot. Anything else to say about these Chiefs?
Yeah, and honestly, you need a lot. They're both 8,400.
Yeah.
So the 4x, 5x salary multipliers don't work as well at the very high and low ends of the salary spectrum, right? Because raw points mean something too. But you'd need at least 60 from the two of them to feel good, right?
Yeah.
And that's not even quite 4x. But given their salary, given their high salaries, like if you got 60, you'd feel okay at least. You probably need 65, 70 to really be like, yeah, now I'm cooking. Even in their absolute explosion last week, they got to 75. Now that's really good. But that was, like you said, like Patrick Mahomes threw 340 yards in the first half.
Yeah.
He threw for 4 touchdowns. He got to like 38 points. Travis Kelce, had 179 yards with a touchdown, got to 38.9 DraftKings points. Like those are ceiling games. Those, when we say ceiling, we usually mean 80th to 90th percentile. that was probably a beyond, 80th to 90th percentile outcome for those guys. And you needed that to feel good. Keep in mind, the explosion also is sort of you have to take into account the context of the week. Only 2 skill position players last week on DraftKings scored over 30 fantasy points, right? It was Travis Kelce and Donta Foreman. It was a very low scoring week. And so, even if Travis Kelce does explode, like if Travis Kelce gets 38.9 points again, he's going to be in the winning lineup. Like that's an amazing score. But at their prices, like they're priced for perfection is the point I'm trying to make. And, they're not priced for good outcomes. They're priced for elite outcomes. And it's hard to find elite outcomes on a consistent basis, even from elite teams.
100%. Travis Kelce is a guy who his ADOT has come down when compared to last season. We don't know if that's his age. We don't know if that's because he started the season with a hyperextended knee. But those extreme yardage outliery type production games are going to be fewer and far between, fewer and farer in between here with Travis Kelce. He's done it. He's surpassed 124 receiving yards each of the last 2 weeks. But this becomes a situation where it's a little bit harder to pencil Travis Kelce in for these elite fantasy production games. I don't know. Another interesting aspect of like the overall landscape of the NFL this year is this like heavy transition to 2 high base defenses. And we see defenses are in 2 high over 60% of their defensive snaps this year. That is the highest rate over the last 10 seasons. And that's kind of muted and led to some of these lower game totals that we're seeing. With that, like we're talking about how we attack that, we really see offenses doing 3 primary things. There is the pre-snap motion. We saw it flash on the screen watching Sunday Night Football last night with the Miami Dolphins. They are leading the league in pre-snap motion rate at over 75% of their snaps. That is one way. Another way is via these like downfield Z-type wide receivers that are utilized as quote unquote safety manipulators. They're working downfield. They're trying to influence one of those safeties to a side of the field to open things up elsewhere. The last piece is this ability of a quarterback to have body positioning, utilizing once he takes the snap, his drop backs, his body positioning, his hips, his head, his eyes, his torso. And that is kind of the final piece here. There's a few quarterbacks that are doing that very, very well. Geno Smith is actually doing that very, very well this season. Has not had the production really. The other quarterback that is doing that very, very well is a guy in Tua Tagovailoa. We saw that last night on his touchdown pass to Tyreek Hill. He's left-handed, so he's squared up. He has his eyes and his body facing the right-hand side of the field, and then he brings it back to the left with a quick snap and a turn of the hips, simultaneously cocking back and letting loose to Tyreek Hill in triple coverage down to the left-hand side of the end zone for a touchdown. So all of those things kind of coming together, there's like 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 offenses that are really utilizing all of those pieces. We have Bobby Slowick in Houston. We have Sean McVay in Los Angeles. We have Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. And we have Mike McDaniel in Miami. So we have 3. Well, actually, Miami's on there as well. We have 4 of those offensive coordinators that are really, really leaning into how do I exploit this 2 high base shell. That's important because all 4 of those teams are on this slate. Is there anything that jumps out from any of those 4 teams? Bobby Slowick in Houston, Sean McVay for the Rams, Mike McDaniel in Miami, and then Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. Is there anything that jumps out to you on this particular slate as potential upside spots?
I mean, I would just say, is it any surprise that we've consistently seen tournament winning fantasy scores come out of those teams? Like, look at how those teams have performed, right? Houston, the team that was not exactly viewed as going to be, a good NFL team this year, but we've gotten elite fantasy scores out of both their primary wide receivers twice already. Miami has been delivering elite fantasy scores all season. The 49ers they're tougher because their overall volume, their pass volume is lower, but we've gotten, elite fantasy scores from Christian McCaffrey, from Brandon Ayuk. from George Kittle on his 3-catch, 3-touchdown performance.
Yeah.
That, of course, happened on an island game, so I couldn't play him. We've gotten, an elite score from Deebo Samuel. It's like the teams that are doing this, like they're consistently delivering elite DFS scores. And surprise, it makes sense, right? You succeed in real football, but taking apart and exploiting the most popular, the current hit defensive coverage scheme, and you're going to deliver good fantasy results as well. So I have been consistently targeting those teams all year because it feels like they just have the lower chance of the bottom falling out, right? Like we've seen teams in good spots fail all season. And look, and that can happen any season, right? Teams always have bad games. But let's go back to Kansas City, right? One of the best offenses of the last several years. Kansas City scored 17 points against Jacksonville in week 2, 21 points against Detroit in week 1, 19 points against Denver. We've seen teams teams that aren't able to beat this coverage scheme, they can still have good games. Right. It's not to say that those teams cannot ever put up good fantasy games, but it feels like they're going to be more inconsistent. And so I have been leaning hard on Miami, especially because it's not only are they an elite offense, they're an elite offense that has successfully figured out how to exploit the cover 2 shell, and that is a condensed offense. Right. Yeah. Houston is not an elite offense, but they figured out how to exploit the cover 2 shell, and they're a condensed offense. San Francisco is an elite offense, figured out cover 2 shell, but is not condensed. Although without Deebo, they've become more so. And why am I missing the other one?
The Rams.
The Rams are not an elite offense, although they probably could be with a little bit better touchdown luck. We'd be viewing the Rams a lot differently if Matthew Stafford had anywhere near a league average touchdown rate. So they're kind of a borderline elite offense, and also it's like those offenses bring the things that we want, right? We want offenses that can put up a lot of points, that have high floors, where a low likelihood of just a total offensive failure, and where we have a really good chance of successfully predicting where the ball is going. Because you've also seen, we've all played DFS games where we nail the offense, and then this offense scored 5 touchdowns today, but not a single tournament-worthy fantasy score came out of it because all 5 touchdowns went to 5 different guys, and no one got to 100 yards, or a fullback catches a touchdown and a lineman or whatever, right? So those offenses they've been all season the primary ones I'm targeting because they check those boxes of high floors, elite upside, and a strong degree of predictability of where the production's coming from.
Yeah, and something you mentioned earlier was the fact that we only had 2 skill possession players score more than 30 fantasy points last week, in Dante Foreman and who was the other one?
Travis Kelce.
And Travis Kelce, duh.
Yeah.
This week, or this for week 8, we have some decisions to be made. And even just looking at these 4 offenses that we kind of talked about to this point, Christian McCaffrey priced at 9,200 against a very, very zone-heavy Cincinnati Bengals defense. We have Nico Collins and Tank Dell that you talked about. Tank Dell coming off of their bye week. Is he going to be healthy after the concussion? Probably. We hope so. Looking at Roshan Johnson, took him 2 weeks. He's still not clear of the protocol. So obviously we have some uncertainty there. But them in a matchup with a very, very zone-heavy Carolina Panthers defense, we have Cooper Kupp is very interesting on the slate because the Dallas Cowboys are in man coverage at the 2nd highest rate in the league. Puka Nacua, elite, absolutely elite against zone coverage, but his targets per route run rate drops from 34% against zone to just 17% against man coverage. And that's with most of his season so far played without Cooper Kupp. So Cooper Kupp, priced at 9K, coming off of an absolute clunker dud 6.9 fantasy point performance. I know because I played him on 100% of my rosters this last week. So ask me any questions you want about that one. And then we have Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle getting banged up, had the back issue, missed an entire quarter plus of play last night. But Tyreek Hill just continuing to go out there and win in this Mike McDaniel offense. So that was 3 players that are priced above $9K for this upcoming slate that we have to be kind of accounting for. All in offenses that are actively looking to exploit too high. How do you make that? Is this a situation where you can foresee just like, hey, at least one of these guys are going to be in every single one of my rosters this week?
I think that there's a good chance of that. It's hard to make a definitive statement like
this
that
is
on
Monday,
right? But I think there's a good chance of it. And if you want, and it also very clearly tells us that one way, we can safely predict even on Monday that all 3 of those guys are likely to be pretty highly owned. Maybe Cup to a lesser extent, because even though Dallas, even though he smashes man coverage, Dallas is still a really good defense, right? One of the top defenses in the league. It's not likely his ownership gets to the same level because people are just going to shy away from attacking Dallas. But they're all going to be owned, right? All 3 of those guys are going to be owned. And so it opens up an opportunity to say, what if more than one of them hits? Not many rosters are going to have both of them or 2 of them, right? So like, I think there's a good chance that all of my rosters have one of those guys, because when you start going a little bit down the tier of skill position players, at the next sort of tier of pricing down, you start to see a gap in overall attractiveness, right? Like Jamar Chase against San Francisco, great player against San Francisco's defense, shaky.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce, you talked about. Saquon Barkley against the Jets and their defense, Puka against Dallas and their heavy man coverage, Raheem Mostert is really starting to get pricey. You start like the next tier is, I think that those 3 guys are clearly a tier of their own, not just in pricing, but really in the likelihood of their success. And so is it possible to squeeze 2 of them onto a roster? Because if multiple of those elite guys put up, 35 fantasy points, that could be an interesting path that very few people are taking. I will say this though, too. On weeks when there's like really clear elite chalk, I always try to have a little bit of exposure to balanced teams to get away from the stars and scrubs construction that you tend to need to do to get to the 9K plus plays. So
yeah,
I probably won't actually have them on every roster. I'll probably have some intentionally more balanced builds that try to avoid the scrubs and stars construction. But overall, like, how can you knock that? They're elite plays in, I don't want to say elite spots. Like, we don't have CMC is not facing Denver, right?
Yeah.
Or Carolina, but they're all in good spots, like elite players in good spots.
We didn't even mention AJ Brown, who just tied history this week by surpassing 125 yards receiving in 5 straight games. The last time that was done was old Megatron Calvin Johnson in Detroit. That is noteworthy nonetheless. I mean, look at this: 131 yards, 175, 127, 131, 137. Only the 3 touchdowns in that span, but 2 of them came against his Week 8 opponent in the Washington Commanders. So what do you make of A.J. Brown now we're in the discussion of elite upside here at the higher pricing tier?
He's a guy who I think has, if you look at guys who've really changed my mind from my perception of them in the preseason, obviously guys like Puka are the top of the list, right? Like, I don't think anyone expected a 5th round pick to dominate like Puka has. But of really established veteran players, A.J. Brown has to be way at the top of the list, because I think I'm not alone in this, really thought that like last season we saw Devonta Smith really close the gap between A.J. Brown. They had very similar underlying metrics, very similar production. And I think, the expectation was that as A.J. Brown continues to get a year older and Devonta Smith continues to sort of emerge, that we would start to see that role flip more in Devonta Smith's favor. And does that necessarily mean it happens this year? I don't know. But I think the expectation is that over time, Devonta Smith will become the 1A to A.J. Brown's 1B. I'm not even sure Devonta Smith is a 1B right now. I mean, he's still a really good player, right? I'm not trying to like throw shade on him, but it's also the way he's being used in the offense, right? A.J. Brown has 75 targets on the season. Devonta Smith only has 50, right? The Eagles are changing how they're using them. It's not just about the outcomes and the results, right? The Eagles are clearly focusing more on A.J. Brown and less on Devonta Smith. their volume per game when games played together last season was much more similar. It was much closer. AJ Brown is clearly separating in this offense, which was not what I would have expected preseason. So AJ, and also this is an offense that doesn't throw a lot, right? The Eagles are not one of the highest pass volume offenses in the NFL. And so when you see that AJ Brown is averaging almost 11 targets a game in a relatively low volume offense, like, that's amazing. You know, like you look at the 49ers, another like rush first, low pass volume, high efficiency offense, right? Kind of like the Eagles. It's rare to see a 49er get 10 targets in a game, right? Because like they spread the ball around, they have multiple elite pass catching options, just like the Eagles. It's rare for them to throw 35 times a game. So for AJ Brown to be averaging over 10 targets a game on the Eagles is astounding. And he's gotten 10 plus in, I want to say 5 of 7. 4 of 7, but he's got, he's got games of 13, 14, 15 targets. Like he is, and those include games in which the Eagles won handily, right? They beat Miami by 2 touchdowns. Yeah. They didn't break away till late. Yeah. But like they were still hitting AJ Brown late in the game. They beat Tampa by 2 touchdowns. He got 14 targets in that game. So like my preconception of the Eagles is, one, they're a team that's fast to take their foot off the gas as they were last year. And you really need to get your scoring on the way up in a non-competitive game. And this game is, seems likelier than not to be a comfortable Eagles win. So you're looking at it thinking, okay, it's probably one of those ones where I need to get my scoring on the way up. But do you? Because like it feels like they're playing differently this year. It feels like they're still not throwing really deep into the game unless the game is competitive. But, we have seen more Jalen Hurts pass attempts. Jalen Hurts actually only has 1 game under 30 pass attempts this year so far, which was a really surprising stat to me because last year, attempts under 30 were common. They pulled Jalen Hurts in the fourth quarter if they were up by 2 or 3 touchdowns, and they just like let their backup QB close out the game. Most teams don't do that, right? Like it's like an NBA thing where you see the backups come in to close the game out in the blowout. So the Eagles are playing differently this year, and AJ Brown has been the primary beneficiary, and he is just like reaving souls out there on the football field. Like he's been eye-opening, right? Like I don't know what other adjectives to throw out there, and he's not like a receiver. We've always known he's good. So that's not really a surprise, but the volume and the consistency of the production are what the surprise is. Like we've known he's always had tons of upside, but the volume and consistency are a surprise to me. And, he probably belongs in that same conversation. I do. Maybe this is just my sort of historical bias I'm having a hard time letting go of, but I still feel like I still have that sense that the Eagles are one of those teams that you generally want to see be pushed in order to reach their ceilings. And not every team in the NFL is like that. Lots of teams in the NFL will hit ceilings regardless of what their opponent is doing. But like maybe I need to let go of that. Maybe I need to let go of that bias and say, hey, that was last year. This is this year.
Do you think we had AJ Brown with a target total, his season low of 6 targets against Minnesota, and the big thing that came out of that game was that AJ Brown was in Jalen Hurts' face on the sideline, and then after that he's rattled off 5 consecutive games of 125 yards or more. Is this a thing? Like we know these two are close. We know that Jalen Hurts is the godfather of one of AJ Brown's sons. Is this a legitimate like connection type thing where like, hey man, you gotta give me the ball a little bit?
It's funny. It's I don't like speculating, and it's hard for me to speculate on something like that because I don't know their relation. I know he's they got the godfather thing going on. It's probably fair to think that if two guys are close, I don't think it's so much that like Jalen Hurts is like I can throw to Brown, I can throw to Goddard, I can throw to Smith, but Brown's my buddy. I'm going to toss it his way. but it is fair to think that if two guys are close, that they can just play better together, right? Like they might, you hear about players who spend time working out together in the off season, that kind of thing, right? Like it's fair to think they could develop more of a rapport where the quarterback can just say like, I know how he's going to run this route. I know when he's going to turn, like I know where to put the ball so that he's there when it arrives, like that kind of connection, right? It's like the Tom Brady, Julian Edelman kind of connection where like Brady would just make throws and Edelman would just be there every single time because they just played together for so long. So, something like that, maybe. Like, I could see that, like, and Jalen Hurts has not historically been the kind of quarterback who latches on to his primary target, right? Like, some quarterbacks are like that. They focus their primary target and they just bombard them. Matthew Stafford is like that. The primary target can switch from game to game, as we saw this last week. But, Matthew Stafford is very much a, like, here's my guy. He's winning. He's beating his matchups this game. I'm just going to hit him, like, all the time. Hurts has not historically been that guy, right? He's historically spread the ball around more, but maybe that's part of the shift we're seeing, right? Maybe that as he's growing and maturing as a quarterback, maybe part of that maturation is saying, if I have a guy who I can consistently bet on to be open on almost every play, maybe I don't need to keep spreading the ball around so much to try and confuse the defense. Maybe the smarter thing to do is just keep throwing it to the guy who's open on every play until the defense proves they can stop him.
Yeah, and A.J. Brown is winning and winning consistently downfield. We got about 10 minutes left here, Mr. Xandamere. Anything else jump out to you from initial pricing perspective when looking at these pricing released for the first time?
Yeah, let's do should we just do like a quick browse through?
Yeah.
I feel like we don't have, like, this was a light injury week, which is, thank God, right? Like, I feel like every week you're playing in dread of, like, who's going to get hurt this week. I don't really see a lot of, like, impactful running back injuries, at least as of right now. Like, new ones rather. Like, we might still get Miles Sanders out, in which case we get Chuba Hubbard, who at 4,800 would sure look like a good value. The Rams situation, the Rams backfield was interesting, where, like, Zach Evans looked like the guy early in the week, and they signed Darrell Henderson off the street, and he wasn't even in the player pool for the.
I know he's there this week,
and they gave him 19 touches off the street. He was like, he supposedly reported in like 30 pounds overweight or whatever, which fine, because he was like sitting on his couch, right? Like,
yeah.
And then Sean McVay called him up, was like, dude, we need you. He's like, I'll waddle my way over there. But like, they're against Dallas, right? So like, there's not a lot of really interesting injury situation at running back, at least.
Yeah.
That it gives us that gives us really stellar values at running back. Running back is actually a tough position for me this week. Like, there aren't a lot of inexpensive plays that look really strong. To me, like, I think the one cheap guy that stands out to me at first glance is Dameon Pierce, who has been wildly inefficient this year. Dameon Pierce is averaging like 2.9 yards per carry. But his role has remained sound. Even in games that the Texans have gotten absolutely dusted, he's still gotten at least 13 touches is his minimum. And he actually has had a bunch of really tough running back matchups so far, right? Like, Baltimore,
like
Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, New Orleans. Now he gets the Panthers, who are one of the softest running back matchups in the league. And he's only 5,300. That seems like a reasonable value option for me at running back.
What about Jerome Ford, who picked up an ankle injury this past week, and now could be just Kareem Hunt there in Cleveland?
I think if Ford continued to play most of the game, right? Like, he looked nicked up early, but he didn't leave the game until the fourth quarter. Yeah. So I don't know if that was like a second injury, or if he aggravated it, or if he just said like, hey, it's really starting to be achy. Like, I kind of, let's take it easy. I don't really know. And so until we get more news, but like, I'm just generally not in the habit of playing running backs against Seattle.
Yeah.
Seattle is one of the top DVOA, run defenses in the league. We've not generally seen running backs have a lot of success against them this year. You could certainly make a bet on Hunt just based on volume if Ford is out, but like, Seattle is averaging 87 rushing yards allowed per game. So I don't know. That's like, it's not a lock button kind of spot. And Hunt's also, he's 5,200. So he's not horrendously expensive, but he's not like bargain basement either. If Ford is out, I think he's definitely in consideration. We also know that he historically has a strong passing game role. We haven't really seen it this year. He's historically a good pass catcher, and Ford has actually gotten, I think Ford did not enter the league with a reputation as a great pass catcher, but he's gotten 19 targets. He's gotten at at least 2 catches in every game since Chubb went down. So like you could project some passing game role for Hunt to give him a little bit of a boost. So I think he'd be fine.
That's was also interesting to me because Kareem Hunt scored those 2 touchdowns, but he only saw 19 offensive snaps. Pierre Strong saw 23 offensive snaps alongside Jerome Ford there. So yeah, could be some interesting ambiguities there. What about wide receivers? See anything valuable there in the value portion?
So I will always. I don't know if Nico Collins counts as a value play. 5,500. I think he's a value play for the upside he brings at 5,500. He has 2 games this season over 30 fantasy points. Good luck finding anyone else at 5K who has 2 games this year over 30 fantasy points, right? Like at the wide receiver position. But outside of that, if we're really talking value like sub 5K, well, his teammate Tank Dell, who I assume most guys come back from a concussion after a week or 2. If Tank Dell is not playing, that's like a much more serious medical concern, right? If he's not recovered from a concussion after 3 weeks, that would be a real worry for poor Mr. Dell. So we will wish him well and hope he's coming back. Other cheap wide receivers, like Kendrick Bourne is a guy who is like horrendously not exciting to me because I just think of him as like this veteran dude who's kind of lingered around the league for a long time and generally not done much, occasionally from vulture touchdowns away from guys that I've been playing.
Yeah.
But he's been the Patriots leading receiver this year so far, right? He's got 3 games of 17.3 or more DraftKings points. He's got a couple games of double-digit targets. Against Miami, when we know that the Patriots are going to be throwing a ton, like, I don't hate that. I'm still going to keep waiting for the Jahan Dotson breakout. Like the guy's good, right? Like unless I'm wrong. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's not. Maybe I'm wrong. But like he sure looked good at times last year. And he got 8 targets last week. He hasn't broken out, but the matchup against a very, very pass funnel Philly defense looks strong. Yeah. Curtis Samuel in the same boat. I think Elijah Moore, as we mentioned, Seattle is really, really good against the run. Elijah Moore doesn't really run the kind of routes that make the best use of. He hasn't run. I'm just trying to remember. He's running outside now, or no? Is he running slot? Or they have Amari running slot? I can't even remember.
Yeah, he's slot. Elijah Moore.
Never mind. Sorry. Then actually, let's take that back about the matchup because Seattle is getting absolutely eviscerated over the middle of the field. So Elijah Moore could be an interesting option. I mean, Deshaun Watson has not looked good is the problem, but But it's weird, right? Like it's weird how bad Deshaun Watson has looked. I mean, he's had plenty of time to get back into sort of game shape. I think if Zay Jones makes his return, although who knows if that'll happen, and there's a question of what role he'll have. Like Zay Jones was running ahead of Christian Kirk in 2 wide sets at the very start in preseason and at the start of the season. But Christian Kirk has been absolutely dominating. So does Zay Jones get that roll back when he comes back, or is he lost it because he was hurt and Christian Kirk crushed? Rashid Shaheed is a guy I will always take shots on because he just brings tremendous inconsistency, right? But find me another guy at 3,900 who has 2 games of 18.3 DraftKings points or more. Right? Like Rashid Shaheed has a lot of upside, and we know that we want pass catchers versus Indy. I think that's probably the main list. I keep wanting to fire at Giants receivers, but against the Jets,
I know
the week to do that.
Yeah, I fired this past week. I fired a lot.
It's painful.
Yeah.
It's so painful.
Oh man. Jalen Hyatt is finally playing snaps. He had 2 long grabs this past weekend, but I mean, on how many targets? Like 5? Yeah.
So, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, that's probably it for me as well. I think the field is going to be looking to tight end to find value once again. It's just the easy way to go. The field is probably going to be looking to defense to find value to try and jam in some of these high price guys that we talked about earlier. With that, X, dude, it was a distinct pleasure having you on. We're going to have to do this again once you get that damn webcam, man. But congrats on being unemployed. I know that sounds really freaking weird, but having been there, 3 years ago, I know that some cool opportunities can come when you're finding your own way. So I wish you nothing but the best, dude. Again, Xandamere and I work heavily out of 1 week season. Go check out our work over at 1 week season. Check out the props package that we alluded to earlier. And until next time, X, thank you for coming on, man.
It's a pleasure. It was fun to talk some ball on Monday. I don't normally get to do that.
Yeah. For sure,
right.
dude.
See you next time.
Right. Later, guys.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.